Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews. My name is Jillian Robinson. I am the Associate Artistic Producer here at Cup of Hemlock Theatre. And today I am joined by the wonderful Ryan Borochovitz, one of our co-artistic producers. Ryan, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, Jill. How are you?
You are on cloud nine right now. That is for sure. I am also feeling great. Got a lot of adrenaline going through the body from the show that we just saw, mixed with a little bit of exhaustion from my busy day. So this is going to be a colorful discussion for sure.
Mhm.
What we are discussing, let's just get right to it. We are discussing Dr. Bird Productions' musical and concert production of Jekyll and Hyde, the musical. This happened at the Meridian Arts Center, October 25th and 26th. So this is a post-run discussion, but everyone, this concert should be on our stages for months, and we will get into why, because Ryan and I's brains and bodies and souls and hearts have been blown away. So this piece is helmed by artistic director Manuel Adrian Mitzi, musically directed by dear friend of mine, Ethan Rotenberg, and choreography and movement direction was by Amelia Ballister, and the company is massive. If I could list all of you individually, I will. We will definitely be peppering in names throughout the episode, but right off the top, I want to give a massive shout out to this brilliant cast. And you can tell phenomenal crew as well. Again, we will dive in further and further, but had to just give that blanket of praise. But before, again, we get too far in, let's do the standard, what we do here at the Cup, our little icebreaker. Ryan, what are you wetting your whistle with tonight?
Yes. So in my cup, it's late at night. We just got back from the show, so I'm just having a glass of water. Very boring, but very hydrating. How about you, Jill? What are you
definitely
drinking?
Not hydrating. I feel like that's a very Dr. Jekyll thing to drink.
This is very Jekyll of me.
Me, on the other hand, I feel like I'm representing the Hyde of this duet in my colorful tumbler here with my colorful straw. I don't know why that's Hyde-esque, but
it's pretty
I have
wholesome.
It's all over the place. I am drinking hazelnut iced coffee because yes, we are coming off of the show. But like I said, I've got a mix of tiredness from the day so I want to keep the adrenaline high. So caffeine is going to get me through. And also my standard mason jar because hydration station. So my Jekyll and my So let's dive in. Previous episode on the Cup, we did sort of do a longer review of the David Hasselhoff famed full production, which will now be, linked to you're watching on YouTube. But Ryan, let's say folks hadn't, watched that installment or that episode. Do you want to give us kind of just like a very brief Spark Notes Jekyll and Hyde synopsis, and then we'll dive into this concert version?
Yeah. So Jekyll and Hyde the musical is just objectively the best musical, hands down.
Ryan's going to be fangirling this entire episode.
At least in my opinion. A controversial opinion, as we found out in that previous episode. There were 5 of us on that panel, and it was really a 3-2 split in whether or not this is a good show. But I love Jekyll and Hyde the musical. I think it's perfect in every way. And so it's loosely adapted from the novella The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. It tells the story of Dr. Jekyll, a scientist who develops some kind of serum that can split the good and the evil parts of the human soul. And when he is unable to get funding for his experiments with the serum, he must test it on himself, and therefore splits his own identity into good Dr. Jekyll, who is this nice guy who wants to marry a swell gal named Emma, and Hyde, who creeps through the night, murders all of Dr. Jekyll's political rivals. That's interesting. And is very sexually aggressive towards this one sex worker who Dr. Jekyll once took a shine to, named Lucy. And he is living this double life. Contrary to the novella that it's based on, this is 100% told through Jekyll and Hyde's perspective, as opposed to the John Utterson murder mystery kind of big reveal. Oh, they were the same person that the novella has at the end. So It's full of power ballads. It's amazing. everybody should go see this. If obviously it's too late to see this production, listen to various cast albums of this, because everybody should have this show in their lives.
1,000%. And honestly, like Dr. Bird, I want this to live as another installment in our city. It was done in the Greenland Theater, which is a beautiful, stunning space of the Meridian Arts Center. Just sound carries so magnificently in there, and the utilization of the space as a cast in the blocking, which we can get into as we, further go into the episode, but just stunning across the board there. Speaking of board, the lighting choices, the movement that was treading across the boards, like all of the boxes were checked. I think I left the smoke machine added a little tidbit of excellence throughout. I even said, I think to Ryan leaving the space, that this, in my opinion, Jekyll and Hyde of this is maybe a huge hot take, but like of all musicals, I feel like this musical could just be a musical in concert for the rest of the time.
As they demonstrated very effectively here.
Yeah, because I feel like it's like, it is, we talked about this, like it's a mix of this, the way the musical is mapped out, like it's a mix of camp, but then it's got all those power ballads. And I just feel like it's very easy to stage in a sort of like more minimalist blocking without it totally detracting from the plot. Like, I think, some musicals, absolutely, you lose a lot by doing it in stage concert. But I actually think with this one, you gain more than putting it up, tying it in like a standard musical theater bow. And this production, we will give you all of our essay, paragraph reasonings why.
And if you recall, in our previous Jekyll and Hyde review of the Hasselhoff Pro Shot, when we had to give a weakest element to the production, you chose the choreography of that one, that it was like too busy and all over the map and wasn't serving the piece very well and making questionable choices. So while the choreography of this was indeed excellent, what we saw tonight, it really did pare it down to the essentials that could only be accommodated in a smaller scale concert format like this, but there was not a bad piece of it. So yes, you could not levy the same critique to this.
Yeah, it augmented a lot of the subtext that I think this musical has going on. And I think by scaling it down to a more like stand-up sort of presentation of what the piece is saying, it levied out a lot that I think you would lose in sort of, the just standard proscenium style musical. Great. So I do feel like eventually we should put a spoiler just in case this does live again. But let's just stay a little bit more on the general appraisals path that we're here. So I kind of, again, we've been dancing around everything, but I say this a lot in productions that I'm a part of. I say this a lot in episodes where, okay, I'm just going to come out and say it. You can absolutely tell when a cast is super strong outside of the production, because when they're on in the production, it's another layer. It's like the pulse of the piece is just magnified so much more. And Brian and I had a chance to chat with some of the actors immediately following this first performance, and like, such magnificent, exuberant humans. And you just absolutely know that it's that effervescence is what added and literally gurgitated the magic of what we saw. So in a nutshell, the chemistry of this cast was incredible. And you can tell those that helmed the musical direction, like you said, Ethan, the choreography, Amelia, and then obviously with Manuel helming the whole project together, like you can tell that everyone's artistry was so respected and all at the same playing space and all being the perfect accessory to each other. Even I also want to shout out Rochelle Bradley, who's our costume designer. Rochelle did costumings for Rapunzel Panto I did a couple years back. Rochelle was also in their production of Hunchback. So Rochelle's been, with Dr. Bird, and also her work all across our stages too, and is a phenomenal costume designer. That alone, all of our dancers' costumes, like everybody was what Carlos wore as Jekyll and Hyde, with the rippability of the costume, like paired again, like I said, with our choreography, with our music, with the light, everything just made this piece brilliant. And I'm going to say it, like, performances on top of all of this show, I felt like we were watching something in New York. Like, this felt like Broadway. Like like a very rich, polished, incredible performance. Mm-hmm. That's my general broad appraisal, Ryan.
Yeah.
You're grinning from ear to ear, like you have been since the drop of the music started.
Yeah. I don't even know how much more I can add to what you say. Yes, those Broadway caliber type performances. And I didn't even realize this, but you had even brought this to my attention that this is a non-union production. Like, these are actors who maybe a lot of them are like making this into their career or already have sort of gone, but they haven't necessarily crossed that threshold, the threshold that you recently crossed yourself as a newly minted union actor. That it's like really stunning and remarkable. I think you said this to me, so I don't want to take the credit for this point, but you're like, God, I hope there are agents in the audience
1,000%.
watching all these people, because yes, scoop them all up. Anybody watching this, if you have room on your agency rosters, because there is some remarkable talent in this cast. So good. Yeah, please.
Well, literally after the Emma Lucy duet done by Maren Richardson, who plays Emma, and Emma Bergen, who plays Lucy.
In his eyes.
Yeah, in his eyes. I wanted to give a standing ovation, and that's mid-show. Like, that's I've never had that impulse to stand up. And actually, the only time we did was when I saw Kinky Boots in New York with my mom many years ago. Everyone stood up after Lola's song, but that was years and years and years ago. Beside the point, but this, I wanted to stand up halfway through the show. Like, that's how absolutely blown away I was. And other moments where my whole body was like rigid and like, yes, like the power, or like sobbing and woof. Sorry, go ahead. I'm fangirling. It's bleeding onto me, Ryan. Go.
No, it's great. Like, I just, we could get into more detail, but like, honestly, we've praised it enough. Should we maybe put the spoiler shield up at some point?
Yes.
Well, do we decide, should it be like a mirror, a spoiler mirror?
I think it should be a mirror.
With an ornate frame.
Yes. That was, okay, so here it is.
Spoilers.
Because a wonderful sort of installment in the minimalism of this piece was sort of just this like framed open, like this open frame that was obviously supposed to indicate a mirror. A lot of the cast members, not only Carlos playing Jekyll and Hyde, but sort of used as a revolving, discovery of self or discovery of something else. And a nice fixture that is predominantly center stage most of the production too, which is an interesting scope.
When it first started, because it took a while for them to like actually use it, but it was sitting there on stage the whole time. And I was kind of like looking at it, and I'm like, that's interesting. I wonder why it's there, because until they start interacting with it, it's not even clear that it's supposed to be a mirror. It kind of just is an empty frame that's kind of upstage of the actors, almost framing Ethan conducting, but sort of like cutting off his head so it doesn't look like it's actually framing him, but that's sort of where it was positioned. But then the first time that Jekyll grabbed it and kind of like looked at it and spun it around, I'm like, okay, this is, my eye already was drawn to it. And now I'm like, okay, they're interacting with it. Let's see where this goes. And then during his initial transformation into Jekyll, we had a stunning image that like I've seen multiple previous versions of the show before. I've never seen it do anything quite like this, where our dancer characters, the female dancer performers who we were kind of first introduced to prominently in the brothel scene where he meets Lucy, Bring on the Men. But one of them kind of comes through the mirror as he's doing his transformation and shows up behind him and kind of puts her arms around him. So I'm trying to kind of get the texture of this image. You could probably describe it better than I can, because I know.
It was just, so like you said, we got all of these women sort of in like these like, brothel leotard. That's sort of the intro to these dancers, the purpose that these dancers, play. But then when we come into Hyde Land, these dancers come out again, but they're shrouded in like black sort of like shrouds.
Even like a dark green, I think. It was kind of like earthy.
Sure, yeah. And so the first one comes out through the mirror and comes behind. So everything's very contemporary styling behind, like you said, behind Jekyll, and sort of like creates the transformation with him as Hyde. And what an image of like these women that were so like vivacious and luscious and enticing. And now they're these forces that are like shrouded, and just that image of having the female hands actually do all of the working. It's like, I think that's just like a layer of Jekyll's psyche that's being manipulated and transferred into Hyde, like having that female presence. And then when he does fully become Hyde, the female body lies limp on the ground. And so you're kind of like, oh my gosh, you watch like, whoa, there was a whole passage of time where maybe Hyde went dissociative, and that's just a body that he has slain. That's his first victim. You know what I mean? Like it was just, and this was all just done through movement and choreo. And this is what I was saying earlier of how this type of subtext would be forgotten if you would do it just as a musical, because that wouldn't be the bog standard plot drive. You know, you wouldn't necessarily think, how do we have to make this scene cook more? It's just, oh, well, we have our set, we have our props, we have our costumes and our actors, and this is the plot. Whereas this is like, okay, we have a whole, music stands and our orchestra behind us. We do have our titular person, but how do we make it a bit more dynamic? Well, you add a layer of contemporary female dancers. Holy yeah. That just like
and can I add
everything over? Yeah.
Yeah. Can I add like two other things about that image that it creates during the transformation is, so first of all, the dancer goes limp. And like you said, it's like, oh no, is this his first victim? What's happening here? How are we to interpret this? Very shortly after, he rips off his waistcoat that he's been wearing as Jekyll the whole time. And when we see Hyde, he's never wearing that waistcoat. And the way it sort of just falls to the ground and lies limp, it's like, that's Jekyll's body that he kills and leaves as a corpse on the ground when he goes off to gallivant as Hyde. So like that idea of bodies going limp kind of both ways. It's sort of, there's a good parallelism there. Hey, it's almost like a mirror. And and then the other thing I'll add to the image of the female dancer performers creating this force, this kind of supernatural entity that flows through him as he becomes Hyde, is that very shortly after that too, and this is still during the song Alive, the first time that he as Hyde molests Lucy, the whole company of these dancers kind of comes out, and he doesn't even touch her, but they surround her, and their hands are everywhere, like growing Venus flytraps out of every one of her pores. It's like, it was incredibly striking visual that was just so well done. And like great for intimacy coordination too, that in a violent sexual scene like that, we don't actually have to have the two key players touch, and yet it feels so much more raw and visceral for that very reason. Yeah, sorry.
It is like the tendrils of his mind, or it is this sort of like Hyde venom is kind of like what these female, entities sort of played for me in that moment. And then what was even more interesting and juicy too is the scene where Emma sings Once Upon a Dream. You have two of the dancers come out still shrouded, but they're doing this beautiful sort of almost like music box sort of memory lane of their relationship. And sorry, do you like the way that I described that?
Yeah, no, I love it. And that's exactly what it was. It was so
that's
perfect.
Exactly, music box, memory lane. Anyways, again, we've seen these bodies be so visceral and grotesque. And now to have them sort of show the beauty and the sort of innocence that Jekyll and Emma had, but obviously that's gone now. And so it just, again, it added this like a heartbreaking drudgery to this song of hope and remembrance that Emma shares, and then it almost was like the two women, they were simultaneous and synchronized until the end, when one of them very much was Jekyll and the other one left very much was Emma, because literally a physicalization of our one dancer like hunched their back, covered their face, and walked off, similar to how we see Hyde's pattern of leaving the stage. And then the other dancer just looking to Emma, and it's like they were looking in a mirror. Like it just, this is getting so granular, but like,
no,
wow.
If I could make it even more granular, I'll also just add the fact that we kind of refer to these dancer figures, especially when they were in that more monochrome costume, which differed from what they were wearing in other contexts. Mm-hmm. The fact that they were the ones who were like the violent part of his mind assaulting Lucy earlier, and then they return in that same garb to be this beautiful memory that he shares with Emma. It further kind of, I think, visually articulates that theme of duality and the good and evil existing within the same body. Because that is the fact that we can have this beautiful memory with his fiance enacted in the same visual grammar as what was a violent attack, using the same bodies in the same costume. Yeah, it's very well thought out. I think all of this is so this is such a good production. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And so we talked about the choreography. I want to touch just to marry the choreography, the music. Mm-hmm. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 piece orchestra, helmed by the phenomenal Ethan Rothenberg. It's flawless. Like, and it's very rare now do we have productions that have that large of an orchestra, let alone a live orchestra at all, right? A lot of productions, especially non-union productions, a lot of them are done via track or have some sort of non-live element to it. And the fact that everything was live and it just added that extra level of care and attendance to the performers, and the cohesion there was just absolutely stunning. I also, again, want to talk about like the sound leveling. The orchestra was very, like the dampening of the sound was just enough for them. I will say, I love that our leads and most of our supportings were mic'd. Most of our supporting characters were mic'd. I did find though, because, and this happens a lot, right? With large productions, a lot of the ensemble members aren't mic'd, so therefore they do have to project, but there were some hang down microphones in the space. That's my literal only critique of all of this, is I just wish those mics hanging down were a bit hotter so that when we did have our ensemble members parking and barking, we could actually hear them a bit more. We were sitting in a place where we could still hear them, but I just worry halfway back of the theater if it would have been a little bit more difficult. And especially because this piece does have a lot of word. It's a very language heavy musical. There's musical motifs and there's callbacks and there's reprises, but it is very chewy with the text. Like you kind of do have to hear to keep up.
Yeah, especially in the ensemble numbers like Facade and Murder, like those where we are hearing the most from our ensemble players who, as you pointed out, weren't mic'd. Those are the meatiest, wordiest songs. And like what I will say is that I agree, like a different placement or amplification of those mics probably would have solved this problem. It wasn't necessarily a uniform issue across the board because some of the ensemble players were just excellent projectors who were able to carry their voice through the entire room, but others sadly weren't. And I'm not going to single out or name anybody. I don't even know if I could successfully do that. But the point is to make anybody feel bad about that. It's just that there was an unevenness within the ensemble, but it's not all chorality. There's a lot of moments where people get an individual solo line within those numbers. So when one person does their so voluminously and then the next person you struggling to hear what they're saying, it kind of makes for a bit of a tough experience in those numbers.
And I definitely don't think the remedy of that is dampening the orchestra more, because I do think there was a crisp, beautiful smoothness to that background music filling the space. But I think the only remedy is just making those hang down mics a bit hotter. Going back to, because we talked about the frame as sort of like a roving set piece, another installment, which I was absolutely obsessed with, is the desk of Dr. Jekyll / the laboratory of Hyde. And the fact that it's just one sort of table and you have the journal, Dr. Jekyll's journal, but then you also just, all we needed, this huge Frankenstein lab with David Hasselhoff, like with big gloves, like putting tube here, gel there, like You just need a couple vials that look like some chemicals are cooking around that
just for him to sip from. Yeah, not
just
even
for
to
him
like
to sip
mix
from,
or yeah.
and then have our notebook. And then what I loved, and this was so crispy, and I honestly just think it's because Carlos, who plays Jekyll and Hyde's microphone, was so hot. Every time he wrote in that notebook, we heard it. Or every time anything was touched on that desk, we got like an ASMR sort of experience. And that was great. Like, it's like the scratching of the pen or the rustling, like the rufflings of the it just was like, this is all we need. That's the only little package I needed to just cover all of the basis of like the science that's going on in his head.
I would say this is just another example of with a concert pared down version like this, less is more. And this necessity is the mother of invention. They come up with so many interesting, compelling images in this way without needing all the doodads and like a big whole laboratory that you wheel in and out of the whole stage, kind of like you said.
Yeah.
And what I would even add, since you talked about him writing in the journal, I don't know if you noticed this, but anytime he wrote as himself as Jekyll, he held the pen normally. But anytime he was Hyde, he held it completely in a fist, like a child writing with crayons, or like a monster who doesn't quite know how to. And like, I would love to be a fly on the wall of the penmanship to actually like peer down into his journal and be like, you could tell when it's clearly written as Jekyll and when it's Hyde, it's just like raving scrapes on the page that are probably very difficult to read, but certainly do convey the mental and moral state of the person doing the writing.
Speaking of monster, our ensemble is monstrous, quite large. And I want to say, again, hats off to the whole team. And I guess this would probably be Manuel's sort of direction here of having them stationed behind their music stands, sitting for most of the musical, or most of the concert rather, and then just having them pop out when they needed to. I just love that we got, obviously, to balance the voices as well. We had like our female presenting characters on one side and our male presenting on the other to balance the voices, but it was also just like a wall of humans. The fact that they were constantly looking out at us, and a lot of the lighting choices also paired with this. We as the audience were illuminated too. So again, going to this like mirroring, it seemed like, you know, they were watching us just as much as we were watching them, utilizing the whole ensemble to beef up, you know, transitions and reactions, even just them sitting in their seats, like in the brothel scene, like having the dancers and the women really chat up the men and having like the women sort of have distaste, like just these little tiny, they seem, you know, small, but it's just every reaction just continually lit the lamp that was already exploding and glowing that this production was. Just clever, like clever music stands sitting blocking. Like it's like, this is phenomenal. Because something I despise when watching musical concerts is when folks aren't actively in a scene. They can tend to clock out. Whereas I'm a firm believer, like if you are on stage, even if you are just standing by, like enliven that standing byness, you know what I mean? And everybody was always present and always watching. And again, I think talking about, you may not get this with the musical because the ensemble comes in and then they exit when they need to exit. Well, having it in a stage concert setting, like the ensemble is always there. And so it's kind of neat. It's like, how is Dr. Jekyll getting away with all of this when there's such a peering presence? Or like, you know, what does it mean when all of these murders are occurring and we do get ensemble members coming into the actual space and seeing it, but then just again, having these neutral bodies always present, sort of watching this downfall on display. It's like magic that you couldn't get in the production, but you get it tenfold in the concert. Okay, where do we want to go from here?
I think I'd like to spend a little more time talking about our main players. It feels obvious, but if you're going to do a production of Jekyll and Hyde, you need somebody who can play the two title roles and play them in a way that differentiates them effectively and sings differently in both of the roles. And Carlos, sorry, we've been saying him just on a first name basis this whole time. I feel like we should give him his proper due.
Carlos Bastarachia.
Pastoricia. I hope we're pronouncing that correctly, as goes with everyone. But yes, he did an excellent job. I know, like, I think so. You said that this is like your second time seeing the show, with the Hasselhoff one being your first. So that's an interesting comparison to draw. I think we had a lot of thoughts to say about the Hoff in that version, who I still think did a good job, but is I guess a controversial take. But yeah, Carlos really did nail it. I think he was sort of an ideal performer for this. He's very prim and proper in his Jekyll, and I honestly like his Hyde performance more than I like his Jekyll performance, and that's nothing against how he played Jekyll, but I just loved seeing him let loose as Hyde, and the way that he really got into it. I think his more bassy singing in the Hyde role, maybe that just suits his vocal register a little better, that maybe he's trying a little harder to tenor it up when he's playing Jekyll a bit. But yeah, I think this man is just a delightful monster, and so the fact that he's also able to play the proper gentleman as the character foil to that role, I think is so, he excellent work.
You play Jekyll and Hyde, it's called range, darling. Like, you literally have to be the opposite spectrums of the craft. And Carlos did that in spades. Like,
like The Confrontation is a song that I will frequently sing at karaoke, even though I'm not a good singer at all. But like, I can kind of relate to the feeling of going back and forth between those roles, and it's hard. And imagine doing it as an actually good singer, not just me half drunk at karaoke. Anything else you want to say about Carlos, or should we talk about another performer? I have a few others.
Just again, across like Broadway bound Carlos, like straight up, the voice, the acting, the emoting, the chemistry, the what such an empathetic delight to watch, and I guarantee to be scene partner too. I look forward to following Carlos' career, because like, holy Hannah, I would love to talk about Emma Virgin, who plays Lucy.
Not Emma, Lucy. Emma Virgin plays Lucy.
And I'm going to talk about them together. Marin Richardson, who plays Emma. I had the beautiful opportunity to meet both of them post-performance, and they are extraordinary human beings. They just emit this light and glow, and I love that. I love meeting super talented performers that are also genuine, kind-hearted, wonderful humans. I looked them both dead in the face, and I was like, you both did due diligence to these women times a million. Please continue doing what you're doing. You're incredible. So Emma and Marin, please keep it up. The vocals, fucking phenomenal. There's my swear word for the episode. And that's not even doing it justice. The technicality on both of their voices was pristine, healthily sung, and both of these roles have very difficult singing tracks. Not only are they very emotional, and you have to go there with both of these roles, but you also need to sound beautiful or womanly doing them. That's sort of part of what the characters ask for. And both of these extraordinary performers did that. Again, I said this already. I was going to give them a standing ovation in their duet mid-show. So snap, snap, snaps. Individually, I want to praise them as well. So Emma as Lucy, like the swagger, the sex appeal, the ownership of space and agency that was immediately brought out in the brothel scene. And then to see that sort of like crack open, and we see a little bit more of like this lost puppy, sort of insecure, abused woman that is being jigged around by every man in her life. But just like, again, talk about, it's so interesting, like the character of Jekyll and Hyde, it's very clear, like this is Dr. Jekyll, this is Hyde. And there's this, literally he switches between two, and he has to drink a potion to do that. The women in this piece they go through two parallel different feelings too, but they don't drink, like that's just what women are. So like to have Lucy be this sort of sexy, like, wanting human woman, and then the sort of Jekyll to that Hyde, I guess, her, cracking open her insecurity, and then that leads her to her death. Like there's that duality that character goes through. And then similar with Emma, she's this like beautiful belle of the ball, sort of innocent ingenue that everyone wants to marry, and has such the largest heart a character could have. And then to see her have to put up with the lack of Jekyll in her life and the lies and the disappearance, and to see her grit, and then to have both of these women sing together, and then in this production look into this mock mirror but at each other. And I'm like, yeah, because you're both going through the same things but on opposite sides. Like they exchange their roles, and that was so beautifully done in the staging of this piece, where they were looking at their individual mirror, but actually looking through the frame space at each other. And then not only that, they revolve it together too. Like, holy moly. So again, both of these women did the Jekyll and Hyde-ness to both of their characters, which is imperative for this piece. And they are technically phenomenal singers. And the fact that they are incredible humans too, that just naturally exudes through their acting. So you are left with constant, dynamic, in-depth due diligence character work on the stage when both Emma and Marin are there. A lot of this piece, like I said, is very ensemble heavy and it's very team oriented, but it's our Jekyll Hyde and then Emma and Lucy that sort of is our triangle that we're sort of tethered to throughout the piece. And the fact that we had the honor of seeing all three of those roles done, like maybe the best they'll ever be done. Yeah, what a treat.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
How can I possibly? I'll just say a couple minor thoughts. I do think, yes, that whole trio of Jekyll, Emma, Lucy, like I said earlier, that if you're going to do Jekyll Hyde, you need to get a good actor to play Jekyll, but you need to get solid actors for all three of those roles or the whole thing will fall apart. Yeah, obviously that's no problem here because they got excellent performers for all three. I love that the song Bring On the Men was included in this version. As we mentioned in the Hasselhoff version, that song, I know there's been a bit of a development hell with this piece and different songs get slotted in and out at different times, but they did not have Bring On the Men in that version. They had a much worse song called Good and Evil, which is just, have you noticed there's themes in this show, but also burlesque. Not great. But Bring On the Men is a banger. It's so good. It is how we're introduced to the character of Lucy, and she owns the stage so much in just any version of it, but especially the way Emma Bergen played the role here. She just shows up and just like, yep, I'm here. All of the men in this brothel have their eyes on me. Jekyll in particular. Hi, Jekyll. Watch my song, and then maybe we'll have a bit of a relationship after this. And it's amazing, and it's just such a perfect song for exactly that function for that character in that moment of the story. Lucy is a character that gets a lot of solos. She has Someone Like You and A New Life. And just the way Emma performed her was like really just knocked every song out of the park. But the song I actually want to draw the most attention to in her performance is A Dangerous Game, which is not a song that like I usually think of as one of like the better ones in this musical. Often I'm inclined to skip it when I'm listening to the album. I don't know, it just doesn't do much for me. But the way she played it, I think, is very different than previous iterations of this I've seen. That in that moment, she's kind of into Hyde, it ends with them very like seductively making out with each other. And that shows a different side to her character than I think we're inclined to give that character credit for. It's a whole new layer of depth. We're supposed to think that she's abused by Hyde and she just wants good old Jekyll to take her away. But she loves the man, and the man includes both of them. Whereas I think the character of Emma can't love Hyde, and she would never understand that Hyde is part of Jekyll. And that's why when he shows up at their wedding at the very end, there is literally no recourse other than to speak past Hyde, get back to Jekyll just long enough so we can kill them both. But there is no possibility of her being on board with the throuple that is Jekyll, Hyde, Emma. But Lucy could. She's kind of like what we see in this particular performance. She's into it.
Well, and like, once again, thank you for having a female character on stage be just as enticed and attracted to the bog standard societal norm of the gentleman. I must go for protection, but then also being like, raunchily attracted and magnetized to the bad guy, to the guy that, offers maybe something a little bit more sexually verby than maybe the standard gentleman. Like, I just think it's not just with women in general, but again, just like what a phenomenal projection of the scale of, sexuality, or the scale of love, like what love can be or what love is. And you're right, in that song, like there is this sort of, yeah, of course you're enticed by this. Like, look at the flame and the chemistry and just the physicality that you two have. And like, sometimes that's enough, right? Or then there's the literal flipping the facade to the other leg of, there's moments when you just want that tenderness and that protection. And again, like, what a great way of sussing out kind of, like love in general, but especially through a female lens. I think like that's very rarely shown on our stages. So I'm very glad you mentioned that, because this production definitely showcased that.
We're kind of getting a little late into the evening. Is there any sort of like last thought or other thing you want to make sure we mention before we wrap this up?
I know I already sort of briefly touched on Rochelle Bradley's costuming, but I just kind of want to tether back to that a little bit, because again, I just think, right, with a staged musical, it is sort of, you do have to have the punchiness of costuming or the punchiness of choreography or music to sort of create any sort of world or space that might be missing from like a set or a bog standard proscenium production. And I just, again, want to tip my hat to Rochelle's brilliance. I thought everything was so meticulously palletized. That's not a word, but we're going to make it one, like a palette. The palette, she palletized the heck out of this. I just think, like everything had its place, like even down to like Lucy's costume, right? The red and the black. And she actually sings about wearing like the red and the black. And Rochelle's always been very brilliant of like sewing, no pun intended, the character into the costume. And so, again, we talked about like our dancer costumes of these like sort of body suits with just like a judged rehearsal skirt. And like that did the trick for those women. And then having our ensemble sort of just be in our, period suit and top hat sort of esque style. Everyone just seemed very well costumed, like, and comfortable and exuding what they were wearing. Yeah. And I think also that is important for this piece too, the costuming, because as in every iteration, our main character, Jekyll and Hyde, it's imperative that there is this dynamic costume piece or him sort of shedding layers or adding layers. So I just think like our eyes are very attuned to costuming for this piece, because we see Jekyll and Hyde struggling and
the facades,
suffocated by it. Exactly. In the facades. So like,
Victorian
what a great
fashion is itself a facade. Yeah.
Amen. We could leave it here for sure.
Yeah.
But 1,000%, this needs to be performed again. Like, this run was short and beautifully sweet, but I want more.
Bitterly sweet because it's short.
Yes. Yeah, I want more. More. Please, more Jekyll and Hyde. It is a musical that is sometimes not really liked or not really thought about. And anytime it comes back on my radar, it's just also this like hunger. Also watching it as a performer too, like it's a reminder. Maybe it's just I also needed to see something like this to kind of remind me of the light and the fire that what we do as performers. But it's such a hungry piece, and like every song and every moment is so charged and raw. Like I was saying to Ryan before this recording too, like it's just this piece shows love in the most raw, visceral, human way, because humans are monsters. There's a lightness and a darkness to all of us. And what this piece does, and what we were introduced to the subtext on such a visual level, because we talked about doing it in concert gifts that out. But I think it's some people who have seen this show might be like, oh yeah, it's not for me, or it's not the best. But when you really get into the nitty gritty and the subtext and the themes, and the one-liners, it's the core of humanity, which is love. And it's the struggle between love of self, love of others, and kind of coming to, can I be my full self, or why do I have to subtract part of myself? And it's like, someone was walking behind me in intermission, and they were saying like, yeah, I think like one of the main things of this piece is like, you can't not have a little bit of evil in you. Like there has to be that balance. And yeah, I agree. Like you can't lose a part of yourself.
Yeah, to what you're saying, something that I kind of want to add, because you're really like speaking about it like this is the highest art like there could be. And like I'm not disagreeing with that guy. I realize that anytime Jekyll and Hyde is on the table, my any semblance of objective critical faculties goes out the window, because my subjectivity is just steeped in all things this musical, and I just love it so much. But it's interesting how part of what I love about this musical is just how outrageously campy and over the top it is. That's just like power ballad after power ballad, and there is like a kind of earnest badness to it that just makes it better. But the way you're talking about it now, you wouldn't even like know that any of that is present. And I think it's because this production, in the way that it's pared down, in just like the top-notch caliber of the performers and the choreography and all the component parts that bring it together, it scrubbed away some of that camp. Maybe not all of it, but enough that it kind of just feels like a good musical, not a I love it ironically kind of musical that I think a lot of people who have less sincere feelings about it than I do tend to approach this as. That we almost, through this particular staging and iteration and presenting it as a concert with these performers, they found the like actually good musical that's always been at the surface of this, and scraped away all the parts that I think make people have pause about singing its praises so sincerely, because the sincerity is there and it always has been.
Absolutely. Wow, the sincerity is there and it always has been. I think that's a great thing to end on.
Nice.
Great statement.
Sure.
Wow. Okay. So this was Jekyll and Hyde, the musical in concert. It was performed at the Meridian Arts Center by Dr. Bird Productions. It ran October 25 to 26, 2024, but we hope to see more. Looking forward to Dr. Bird's productions coming up. I know there's going to be a certain interview with a certain someone down the line that is affiliated with Dr. Bird. So keep your eyes and ears peeled to Cup of Hemlock for that footage. But in the meantime, Ryan, where can folks find and follow you?
No need to find and follow me personally, because I'm not that interesting. But if you like me and my theater thoughts, most of them tend to live here on the Cup. That's what you're listening to right now. It's Cup of Hemlock Theatre on YouTube, Cup of Hemlock Theatre podcast in all the podcast places, at COH Theatre on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Still not calling it the other thing. And even though we're recording this on the evening of the 25th, we're intending to release it on Halloween. I'm wearing an orange shirt. I wonder why. I look like a pumpkin. So happy Halloween, folks. I hope you enjoyed your October, and there's a lot of great stuff coming up here on the Cup all throughout November and indefinitely.
Woohoo!
How about you, Jill? Where can people find and follow you?
People can find and follow me and my artist Instagram account, Jillian.Robinson96. Do not be surprised if you see some Lucy covers down the line. Every time this musical comes back to my mind, that rhymed, Lucy comes back out of my voice. So there might be some covers of me singing some Lucy stuff on there, and any upcoming projects or recording studio tidbits. Maybe, keep your ears open and your eyes peeled to the account if you'd like to catch up. But on that note, let's bring on the sleep to round out our night. We'll do a final cheers. And as Ryan said, we've got lots of wonderful content coming down the line. In the meantime, stay safe, Stay hydrated and keep watching these stellar live performances on our Toronto stages. See you next time.